What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to give you 5 things I absolutely love about my Cb750. I've had a couple of these motorcycles to this date, and this is probably one of my favorite bikes in the collection for many aspects. And today, I'm going to give you some of the reasons I love it, some of the reasons other people love it, and just an overall little bit of appreciation for this bike. I know it gets a lot, I know it gets praised a lot, but I like to take this opportunity to express certain details that I find to be very enjoyable about this machine. Moving straight to number 1 is the fact that this bike is so smooth. These motorcycles, when they came out, were known to balance a coin on the engine after 100 hours at redline on idle. But real life smoothness and functionality, if we're on the bike, the only real vibration I feel is a little bit in my hands, just because of how the handlebar is set up. But 3,000 RPM, I can even upshift 2,500 RPM, 2,200 RPM, and the bike will just keep going. It is so smooth, and this 4-cylinder from Honda is one of the absolute best engines of its time. It might not be the most powerful, but man, is it reliable and just enjoyable to ride. 2,000 RPM, 30 miles per hour, and I still have enough power to accelerate. Now, ideally, I should be up a gear, but just to point out how smooth that this bike can actually be at low speeds is incredible. Moving on to thing number 2, kind of relating to the smoothness of this bike, but it's the throttle response. This bike has 4 carburetors, 1 for each cylinder that it has, which is a blessing and a curse. But when they're tuned correctly, which is sometimes hard to get, the throttle response you get out of those 4 carburetors acting like individual throttle bodies is absolutely phenomenal. In the earlier versions of these bikes, they had individual throttle cables going to each carburetor. Now they're kind of built into one singular contraption that pulls and pushes them evenly, but you do get the response, and it's phenomenal. I can't imagine how a individual throttle cable going to each carburetor would feel. It probably feels so snappy, but the downside of that is they're incredibly hard to tune. The reason they went to the setup that's in this bike is because of reliability and serviceability, but you still get an amazing throttle response, which in some newer bikes, because they've gone away from throttle cables, gone away from carburetors, you don't get that snappy instant response like you do with some of these older bikes. And the fact that this has 4 carburetors, not just 1 or 2, makes this bike absolutely a joy to ride around. Pair that with the smoothness of the engine, the throttle feel is just so good. You get such an enjoyable and rewarding ride from this machine. It's not something you have to go absolutely crazy with, and it's something you can have fun even at low speed. Old machines with their mechanical feel and the mechanical things going on in them are just so amazing to get on, and the feeling you get from them just is unmatched with most newer bikes. The third thing I love about this motorcycle, of course, is the styling, the design, how it looks. This is an amazing looking machine that Honda has built and given us, and it's one of the most iconic motorcycles of all time. When the Z1, the GS750, and all of the bikes related to those came out, I'm not going to say that they were modeled after this bike, but this bike was one of the first. This bike kind of set a standard. The Cb450 looked similar, and these were the universal Japanese motorcycle, and this bike was one of the early ones, and I think one of the best looking ones of the time. It's uncomplicated design with a single overhead cam. The 4x4 exhaust is amazing to look at. The Kawasaki Z1 is also a stunning bike, and both those bikes fall into a category of just amazing looking machines of their time. And nowadays, many manufacturers are trying to copy the styling of these bikes for good reason. They look incredible, and this bike also feels incredible to ride. there's very few things as satisfying as having a clean Cb750. They just look amazing, and unfortunately this bike is missing the original exhaust. And man, with those original exhausts, they are just eye candy, especially when you pair them in a nice bright color like the vibrant blues that they had in the earlier days, the sunrise orange, or even this beautiful red that's on this bike right here. They had many great colors, including planet blue, the green, and so on. Honda built an incredible looking machine, and it's definitely one of my biggest things I love about the bike. Fourth thing that I want to bring up is the insane experience of riding this machine. The people that have owned them, the people that appreciate them, the community that these bikes have around them. It's such a positive and great place to be. There's a lot of toxic communities, but the Honda Cb750 isn't really one of those bikes that has a community like that. A lot of people are willing to share the information they know. A lot of people love to share their stories, and that is honestly a lot of vintage bikes have the same community behind them. But they built so many of these bikes, almost everyone and their dad had one at one point. It's fantastic to see that people still to this day love and appreciate these bikes almost as much as they were appreciated from the factory. I've heard lots of stories about people putting tons of miles on these machines, riding them across country. At the end of the day, that's what machines like this are for. And that brings me into my final point. The fifth thing I love about this bike is the comfortability and rideability seating position of this motorcycle. Now, I'm someone who does ride sports bikes, and I'm very comfortable on a sport bike, don't get me wrong. But there's something about this machine. You can really just get on this bike and put it through its paces. You can just ride and ride and ride and ride without any problem. You can sit on this bike for hours on end, and it just won't get old. You won't get tired. And the seating position is awesome. I don't really like having a backpack behind me, unfortunately, just because it is a little awkward with this motorcycle, just because of space. I like sitting a little further back, but everything feels right where it's supposed to be. The handlebars at a comfortable approach, and even they had lower handlebar options, which I think would have been a little bit more comfortable. The factory handlebar positioning, the seating position, the seat itself, I find everything to be very comfortable as long as they're upkept properly, and a very enjoyable ride altogether. Now, this bike will go 70 miles per hour, but the way it's geared, I'm in the highest gear that it has right now. It's not really geared to go that fast. It's really comfortable around 55-60 miles per hour, and it's not uncomfortable at higher speeds, but you're definitely ringing the bike up and getting it to its higher RPM levels. But I wouldn't flinch at taking this bike on some back roads on a multiple day trip, or going 3-4 hours on the bike after a proper tune-up. This thing would absolutely perform incredible, and I would not get uncomfortable. There's many occasions in the last couple of years where I ride this thing back to back to back, go take it from event to event, ride it around for hours on end, and after all of those events and everything, I'm never really uncomfortable or saying that I need to get off this bike and take a break from it, because there definitely are some bikes in my collection that I get on and I'm like, okay, it's been like an hour or two of riding, I need to get off, take a break, stretch my legs, decompress, and this isn't one of those bikes. Paired with the comfortability, the seating position, the smoothness, the throttle response, putting everything together, this bike comes out to such a well-rounded and amazing package. The Cb750 truly is an icon of its time. It truly is an icon in motorcycling history, making one of the biggest splashes in the motorcycle market ever. And this bike, just because it is smooth and comfortable and everything, doesn't mean it's not fast. They still produce about 60 horsepower. They do weigh a little bit. There's a lot of front end weight on the bike. That's all I have for today. If you guys have enjoyed, do me a huge favor, subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment down below on your experiences with the Cb750. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.